Auspicious greeting. Welcome back to the core teaching class. Last class, we talked about the six paramitas, which are giving, discipline, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. The six paramitas are practice that can take us from the sword of ignorance to the other source of awakening and, of course, nirvana. It is a practice that benefit both ourselves and others. So I hope that we can try to practice it in our daily lives. For the last three class, I thought it would be good for us to learn more about Venerable Master Hsuen Yun. He is the founder of Fo Guang Buddhist Monastery and also the propagator of humanistic Buddhism, and about him and his teachings. If you're unfamiliar with humanistic Buddhism, you can go back to the spring course. We have one class, what humanistic Buddhism is. Venerable Master Hsuen Yun is 95 years old this year. He is one of the prominent monks in the contemporary time. Throughout his life, Venerable Master Hsuen Yun is dedicated to the propagation of Buddhism. He has founded over 250 branch temples around the world up to date, and 5 universities around the world, mainly in Asia, but there's one University of the West in the US, in Los Angeles, and of course there's also one in Australia. And aside from the universities, he also founded a television stations, a newspaper publication, and so on, many more. Questions that we probably have is, how did Venerable Master Hsuen Yun succeed in spreading humanistic Buddhism around the world and succeed in all these endeavors? How does Venerable Master Hsuen Yun practice? What kind of philosophies does he have? I'm sure these are the burning questions that we all have. And so we'll learn more about this great Buddhist master for the last three classes. Before we learn about the philosophy that he has and how he applied these dharma in his journey of propagating the Buddhist teachings, we will first learn about his life and what he have achieved. So for this class, we'll watch a video of Miss Jane Teller. She is a Dharma facilitator in our Toronto branch temple. She'll be sharing about Venerable Master Hsuen Yun. I thought it would be interesting to learn about Venerable Master through a Western eyes. Now, let us learn about the life of Venerable Master Hsuen Yun. But one thing to take note is that this class, the original class, was actually held in 2014, and so when she talked about the branch temple, she mentioned 200 branch temple, but up to date we do have over 250 branch temple. But aside from that, all her other description of the master's life, they're great. So now let us watch her video.
Venerable Master Hsuen Yun, as I mentioned, is the founder of Fo Guang Temple. You'll see many pictures of him around, and there's just so much information out there. But we seldom talk about him in the Dharma classes. So I think this is a real treat. Now, I have a question to ask. Who's going to be my guinea pig? I won't. Somebody put their hand up. What is a bodhisattva? And this is for the new people, because the ongoing people should know. Yes, sir.
Yes.
You're new. It was written that this is a person that is motivated by great compassion to seek Buddhahood for self and to help others. And I've written up here that there are great vows involved, not great vows, great characteristics of the bodhisattvas. In the Chen school, there are 4 great characteristics, and they are great vows, great compassion, great practice, and great wisdom. And there's 4 main bodhisattvas that coordinate with this. Also later on you will look and learn about the 6 paramitas for someone that's really wanting to be a bodhisattva. The 6 paramitas are ways to practice, and I've listed them here for you as well. And they include, and you'll learn this, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom. Now, the reason why I started off with that is because years ago when someone told me about the founder, Venerable Master Xing Ying, they said he's a great bodhisattva. And I went, oh, okay. But, you know, I never believe anything that I'm told at first. I have to figure it out myself. I like to research it. Just like the Four Noble Truths, I had to research that. So I thought, okay, let me look into this. So I did. And then I realized, oh my goodness. But I'm not asking you to believe me. After maybe talking about Venerable Master Xing Ying, you can draw your own conclusions. But I really wanted to start with that, just so that you can understand what a bodhisattva is. So just Venerable Master Xing Ying, as your handout indicated, I just gave you a brief listing of things that I'm going to talk to, but any book, any of the books that he has written, you'll find a nice biography about Venerable Master Xing Ying in it. All the books have something, and maybe a little bit different of a twist. So he was born in China on August 19th, 1927. He's 87 years of age. He's in his 88th year. He was the 3rd of 4 children, but he had a very close relationship with his oldest sister. And I don't know if you were able to read this online or got one of these books. This is a nice little review of his life as well. The Li family lived in a small rural village just outside of the city, a large city called Nanjing. And for the Chinese people here, please excuse my pronunciation. I did ask the gal who's been teaching our grandson Mandarin to help me a little bit. So, but again, I have a very English tongue. Now, it was a farming community, and the little book here said that the soil was very salty. So the environment in the soil was very harsh and made a livelihood very difficult there. Now, Xing Ying's father, he had a very small incense business, lived very humbly, but Xing Ying learned a very strong work ethic, and he learned a very strong sense of industriousness from his dad. Now his mom, and never did say, but I didn't really look into it, but she spent most of his childhood in bed. She was not well, her health was poor. So he was really, in essence, raised by his grandmother. Very interesting woman. She was illiterate, but she was very Buddhist. She would chant the sutras and chant the Buddha's name. And she'd get up every morning and meditate, and Xing Ying and his sister, his older sister, would get up with the grandmother. And that's how they learned their basic Buddhist sense. Yeah, very, very interesting woman, especially when and this plays a predominant role in his life later on. As a young child, you know, at the age of 3, this kid was very sensitive and caring. His sister, who was interviewed for the biography, said that at the age of 3, he wasn't a very big boy, but he managed to get this candy jar, which he couldn't carry, but he dragged out to the center of the village and shared all the family treats with the neighborhood. You know, he just dragged it and shared it with everybody. Just a kind, kind little boy. Now, what was interesting, in 1937, when he was 10 years of age, the second Sino-Japanese war broke out. And this was interesting because of many factors, but this was the first time he was approached by a monk to become a monk. He was approached at the age of 10. And the monk said, would you want to be a monk? And Xin Ying says, yeah, I do, but I want to bring my grandmother. He says, well, that's not going to work. So they didn't pursue that. But I thought that was quite interesting. So, but he also tells the story when this war broke out of artillery shelling. He could hear the noise. He saw fighting in the streets. In fact, one day there were all these corpses in the street. And he saw one of the soldiers were still alive. And he managed to get that soldier to safety. But he ended up hiding under some corpses to save his own life. My goodness, I thought, poor child, 10 years of age. That same year, his father left to go on business to Nanjing and never returned. Months and years went by. I mean, the mother was struggling anyways with 4 children. Little tiny business, and the father never came back. And they kept falling deeper and deeper into poverty. At the age of 12 years of age, I think of my grandchildren, I think of my own kids, but 12 years of age, there was a defining moment, and your handout talks about this, defining moment in his life. And his mother, Mrs. Lee, and he set out to find out what happened to the father. It's quite likely that he was killed. There was a huge battle. It was called the Nanjing Massacre. And it's quite literally, that's probably what happened to the father. Now, midway to Nanjing, the second time, he was approached by a monk. And this monk was from the monastery just outside of Nanjing. And they asked, this was the secretary of the monastery, and he asked, he says, would you like to be a monk? Second time. And yes, he did. And he ended up being tonsiled by Master Xinghai. But, you know, I thought about this, the courage of his mother, 12 years of age, the selflessness of his mother to let him go. Like she said later in his biography, she started out to find her husband and returned without her son. And she said that she had to let him go because he was such a promising child, that there was no opportunity for him because of their poverty, no opportunity for any education. And she felt that if he could progress into Buddhist studies, that he would be better off with going in than with her. Oh my goodness, my heart kind of went, oh my, what a very courageous, selfless mother to do that. So off he went, and by 1941 he was ordained at the age of 14. Yeah. And he talks about when they started going in for ordination, he had to take 250 precepts, just the precepts, not the Bodhisattva precepts, they were separate. And he talks about how grueling these classes were and the practice were. And it lasts for 53 days. For example, one of the teachers would say to him, for example, have you ever killed anything? I mean, he's a 14-year-old kid. No, I haven't. And the discipline master would have this switch, and he would hit him. He says, you mean you've never killed a mosquito? And he'd say, oh yeah. And then he'd hit him again because he lied. And this is the type of questioning, just to open them up, just to get them thinking, just to get them to be mindful. He made a monastic vow at this age of 14, and his vow was to spread the Dharma as if it was a family obligation and to benefit all sentient beings. Now, we talked underneath the screen, I mentioned about the Bodhisattva vows. Now, Bodhisattvas make great vows. And with these great vows come great aspirations. Now, what I mean by that is, you know, in normal life, you're living in the past, living in the future, you're caught up about somebody saying or doing, you're wasting a lot of energy. Imagine if you make a great vow And the aspiration is to accomplish that vow. You get rid of all the other superfluous stuff that's bothering your mind. And that leads to great accomplishments. So bodhisattvas are able to do that because they center in on these great vows. So 1945, he continued in his studies at Zhoushan Seminary, with Master Shufan. Now, Master Shufan, it's important because he was a leading reformer back then. This is 1945. And his belief was Buddhism must adapt to the modern era to remain relevant. Humanistic Buddhism. And this formed Shen Ying's vision for the future. Very, very young age. It's interesting how the conditions fell for him. Now, he also took at this time a job as a principal in a school. Now, here he is, this young lad who probably thought, I'm not going to advance this. And here he is leaving. Oops. Yeah, hello. And he's taking a principal in a job as, in an elementary school, and he starts writing, because he's always written. And he starts writing, and he creates this monthly magazine with another monastic. It was called Raging Billows. I thought, that's kind of appropriate. In 1949, there's a group of them. They called themselves a relief group of monastics. And they felt that they were going to go to Taiwan. So he arrives in Taiwan. The crossing on the ship was really difficult. It was a very difficult crossing, and they were sick. I don't know if there was a typhoon coming in, but it was a difficult crossing. And when they landed, you have to understand there was a lot of anti-communist paranoia in Taiwan at that time. And Buddhist monks, the monastics, you know, the national government there just didn't know how to read them. They were kind of an unknown quantity. And that's because there were rumors that the communist spies were dressed up as monks. They disguised themselves as monks. And this ultimately led to the breakup of these 100 monks that went as a monastic relief group to Taiwan. Quite a few of them were jailed, and Xin Ying was one of them. And he writes about being in a jail cell that he couldn't lay down. They were like sardines. They were all crammed into this jail cell. And he stayed there for 23 days. Some of the others were under house arrest. Others just disrobed, left. Now, it was some very kind lay people that really helped to free these jailed monastics. It was a very difficult time for him. Over his lifetime, he was incarcerated 3 times. 3 times he writes about. Now, what I found really interesting, I don't know if you've been able to, this is Handing Down the Light, which is a wonderful biography on Venerable Master Shen Ying. And this is his book that he wrote on the biography of Shakyamuni Buddha. And I found that so much of his life he patterned after Shakyamuni Buddha. I always say follow the Dharma, look at Shakyamuni Buddha for an example on how to live your life. So what I found was interesting, the Buddha, after he became enlightened and after he traveled around and did teaching, so many of the Brahmins, the priest group, the priest caste, didn't really very much like what the Buddha was teaching because it was so different from what they were teaching in Hinduism. But as the Brahmins would challenge the Buddha, they ended up becoming his followers. And the same thing happened here. The government assigned these enforcers to follow Venerable Master Shen Ying around, to watch and listen to what he was doing. And they became his followers. Because they saw the purity in the practice and the purity in the teaching. So meanwhile, the war in mainland China had really created a lot of panic, widespread panic at this time. They were burning temples. They were killing monastics. And so many monastics were fleeing. They were fleeing to Taiwan at this time. And this whole circle of Buddhist monastics, the nuns and the monks, were very shaken. Their faith was shaken, and a lot of them disrobed. It's really very, and this is the time that Shen Ying was there, and he went from temple to temple to temple, from Taipei to Taishan, and he was turned away. He was homeless, he was hungry. There's stories about him meeting a classmate of his. The classmate had a few coins from doing maybe a funeral service and managed to get some rice, cooked rice, into Venerable Master Xing Ying. One night a typhoon hit and he found shelter under a temple bell. But finally he was welcomed by Master Miaogu, the abbot of Zhanggan Temple. And what was so important about this Master Miaogu was that he was native to Taiwan. So he was accepted by the Taiwanese. He wasn't an outsider. And he took Venerable Master as his protege. And as he would travel around teaching the Dharma, Venerable Master would travel with him. And this was great because it led to him forming friendships and affinities and being trusted by the others in Taiwan. And it also led in 1952 from an invitation for him to teach in the city, the northeast part of Taiwan, which is Ilan. And so he went there to teach, but there had been venerables that taught there before. They didn't stay. It's a 4 to 5 hour train ride, and it wasn't luxurious travel in a train. And the roads were very dangerous, crisscrossing the mountains. But he returned. He said, no, I will go. So Lian Temple was there, and this is where he would teach. The people there, it was a very poor community. They were socially repressed and educationally deprived. They were cut off by the war. There was a lot of suffering, and illiteracy was prevalent. So Venerable Manyi had to reach into his bag of tricks and use very skillful means. And when I talked earlier about his grandmother, I'm wondering if he didn't think about his grandmother, who was also illiterate. And he would teach the people there to chant the sutras and to chant the Buddha's name. Conditionality, I see. I was sitting there reading them and I thought, yeah, doesn't this just serve us right? All these things, all the experiences we have lead us to where we are. Also, this became his first experimental site for humanistic Buddhism. Now, underneath the screen is about humanistic Buddhism. I forgot to advance this. This was going on, crossing into the war. And crossing from the war to Taiwan. Okay, so here he is. So what is humanistic Buddhism? Anybody? It's written under here for the new students. But what is humanistic Buddhism? Pardon?
Are we to see some text that we can see?
Yeah, it's underneath the screen. But for the ongoing students, the new guys, you're fine. It's written up there for you. But what is humanistic Buddhism? Now, the objectives of humanistic Buddhism is to give people faith, to give people joy, to give people hope and convenience. Venerable Master Xing Ying, now here you see in the picture up here, he used an overhead projector. That was innovative at that time. He was really a modern marketer, a master of innovation, a prolific author, and he formed a children's choir. He also offered creative writing classes, ways to share the Dharma, but he also took care of the physical needs of these kids. In the choir, in the creative writing classes, they didn't have a lot of food. They were hungry, so he enticed them in to the choir and the classes by giving them food and gifts. bribing them, but it worked. And what's so interesting is that some of his very first disciples, ending up being monastic disciples, and forming the nucleus later of Fo Guangsheng Temple, wrote that they went in there to learn to have creative writing classes. And they ended up learning the Dharma as a secondary thing, but that wasn't their focus. They wanted to learn to write, they wanted the food, they wanted the treats, and they ended up staying, which was interesting. And all this time, Venerable Master continued traveling, teaching and writing the Dharma from Taiwan, across Taiwan, from Ilan to Kaohsiung. Now, the other thing that I thought of when I saw this with how he worked with the children, how innovative he was with the children, was I thought about the Buddha. Now, we often learn about the Buddha's turning of the first Dharma wheel was when he went and he taught the 5 ascetics that he had been with. But actually, in the biography, you find out that before and during and after his enlightenment, he met 2 children. One was Savesti, who was the water buffalo boy. And there's a whole sutra on him, because there's a lot of learning on how this young boy did his job. He was of the lowest caste. He was an untouchable, and he would work with the water buffaloes. And he befriended young Prince Siddhartha and would bring him grass that he would feed the buffaloes for the Buddha to sit upon. The other child he met was Sajuta. She was the young girl who offered him the goat's milk. Now, what's important here was in reading the biography, after he became enlightened, the kids came to visit him, and they noticed a change in his demeanor and his appearance and everything, and asked him, "What's happened to you? You know, like, what's going?" And they were so moved, they actually bowed to him. And they said, "You know, what's going on there with you?" And he explained that he had reached enlightenment. And they actually were the ones that, he said, "I've become awakened." So they called him the Buddha. And what's more interesting, the tree that he always sat under was called the Papala tree. And they said, "Oh, that's the tree of awakening." So they called it the Bodhi tree. But after his enlightenment, the Buddha walked along his pathway, which had a little pond to the one side where beautiful lotuses would grow. And the Buddha contemplated these lotuses, and it was by contemplating the lotuses drew him to understand how he could teach people. Because he looked at the lotuses and their life and how they grow as to the human nature of sentient beings. But he started out with the first class he taught, not to the 5 disciples, the 5 ascetics, but to these kids. Because he said to the kids, "Come next day at noontime and I'll teach you about what's happened to me." So off they went. They came back the next day at noon with their usual food offerings for the Buddha. And one of the little boys brought a little basket of tangerines. And they passed the tangerines around, and then the Buddha grabbed the tangerine and he started to peel it. And he says, "Just look at the smell as you peel the tangerine. Look at the taste as you taste the tangerine," and the nectar and the liquid became his class. And he says, "Look at the segments in the tangerine. If we're mindful to the taste and the peeling and the odor, mindful in the minute, and we look at the segments of every segment of the tangerine we eat, how many times do you eat a couple of segments of tangerine and then you just gobble the rest down, not being aware of the first or the second segments?" So the Buddha says, hey, you know, this is the way we should live our lives. If we look at the segments of the tangerine like 24 hours of a day, and we try to be mindful for those 24 hours of a day. So that was really his first teaching. So I go back and I think, wow, I wonder if Venerable Master Xing Ying didn't look at this opportunity that the Buddha talked about in the sutras about this teaching, and look at an opportunity with his growing up with his grandmother being illiterate, and bring them both together. But there was no limit to his Venerable Master Xing Ying's compassion, his generosity. His energy was tireless to be able to do what he did, the writing that he did, the teaching that he did, the traveling that he did. And again, as I said, these students ended up being his first generation monastic disciples. They formed the nucleus of Fo Guangsheng Temple. So here he is writing, just constantly writing. Fo Guangsheng Temple, the aerial view. Well, this is quite, he started saving money, his disciples, from teaching Dharma classes, doing funerals. He'd save everything, and then finally he says, I want to build my own temple. And they looked at land that was available, and there's a nice little article, a segment in the chapter of his biography about searching. But actually what I found interesting was this Chinese couple that were living in Japan came to Venerable Master Xing Ying, and they were really having a rough time, but they owned this large piece of property. And they said to him, if you could buy this for your temple, we'll give you a really good deal on it, but it would help us live because we have no money. Our money's all tied up. So he loaded his monastics and his disciples into a bus, and they drove out to check out this property. He was the only one that got out of the bus. Everybody else stayed in the bus because it was a hilly, mountainous, bamboo-infested area, gnarled bamboo, and he was gone for an hour. And the disciples thought, oh my, will he come back? And he did, and he was so happy. He says, I'm going to buy this property. And they went, oh no. And he did. So you take a look at the picture up there, and they've cleaned it all, a lot of it, and the building was built, they would start with one building at a time. But there's a wonderful story, and in fact on YouTube, I looked at presenting this to you, but it's over almost 2 hours in length. And there was another nice one, only 13 minutes long, but just got to the good stuff and it was gone. So I thought, no, that's not going to do it. But do check it out. Google Venerable Master Xing Ying on YouTube, and you'll see lots of stuff there that you can check out for yourself. But they show one part when they're building the main shrine. Now they had to save their money, and they put the forms in to pour concrete, and the cement trucks were coming, and they were pouring the concrete, and didn't just a typhoon hit. And it's just pouring down rain. So they went and they got their bedding to cover up the cement, and they were standing there using their hands so that the cement wouldn't be washed away. And they ended up saving the cement, but by morning their hands were bleeding, their knees were bleeding, but so it wasn't easy. The challenges that he met, just even clearing the land and building all these buildings, took a lot of time, a great deal of time. Now the objectives, well, first of all, the foundation of Fo Guangsheng is built on culture and education. And I've listed for the new students the objectives. The objectives of Fo Guangsheng Temple is to nurture talent through education, propagating the Dharma through culture, benefiting society through charity, and purifying people's minds through cultivation and practice. And you see that here. You see this in your programming here. You see the objectives of humanistic Buddhism echoed here in these classes as well. You see it incorporated with every part of Fo Guangsheng Temple. Now what I found was just very poignant was in 1985, Venerable Master Xing Ying passed on his abbotship of Fo Guangsheng Temple. And why did he do this? It shows his management style. Teamwork through networking. He wanted the organization to survive. Too many organizations are very narrow-minded in the fact that just one leader hangs on to everything. The Buddha didn't act that way. The Buddha would build a monastery and then leave key people and then move on. The other fact I wanted to bring again, what I found interesting, the Buddha, King Bimbisara gave the Buddha some property, a bamboo forest. And yet Fo Guangsheng was built in a bamboo grove. I found that interesting. And that's where the first monastery for the Buddha was built. And I found the conditions interesting. Just thought I'd mention that just when I was reading. And so he passed on the abbotship to Venerable Master Xing Ping. And his devotees were concerned. Oh, no, 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 we want you to stay. We want you to be the abbot. And at this time, Venerable Master Xing Ying said, what did the Buddha say? The Buddha emphasized to follow the Dharma, not the follower, the leader. Follow the Dharma, not the leader. And he also said that passing on the abbotship, he likened it to clouds. He said that the more that you go higher, the freer that you are. And he was free to float and travel. And because he did this, because he passed this on, passed the baton on, he was free to travel. They say in that he spread to 5 continents, and there are some of his major monasteries and temples, and here they are. There's Si Lai Temple in LA. There's Nên Thien in Australia. These are the largest temples, and in Africa as well. And now today, by going west, now Si Lai Temple itself, it took him 10 years to get that built. He found the land. He sent some one monastic over with some money, and she reported back, things are really expensive here in LA. Gave, I think it was it $70,000, Venerable Master? 50,000. And they were looking at land that was 70,000. It just blew their mind. But no, it took 10 years, and a lot of it was the local people. They were concerned about noise. They were concerned about a lot of things. But then there was, as conditionality is, there was an event in LA, in California. People were suffering. I'm trying to think if it was a mudslide or a hurricane, whatever it was at that time. And anyways, what Fo Guangsheng did was they raised money and contributed, and that finally brought the people around. It took a long time. But nowadays we have over 200 temples internationally. I know, unbelievable. This is one man. And over 2,000 monastics, over 1 million disciples and followers worldwide. Wow, unbelievable. And when we take a look at it, he is recognized as one of the forefront leaders in modern reformation of Buddhism. When we look at it, and what I find interesting, and he's a prolific writer. There's many books, and I could have put tons and tons of books. But when I read that one, I went, oh, that's interesting. The business and the Buddha. This is one of his books. I'll pass this around if you're interested. There's a great article in here on humanistic Buddhism and the knowledge of management. How can you be a good company with good management principles and adhere to the principles of humanistic Buddhism? Great book here. So I put that up because that kind of led into me showing you this book. If anyone wants to take it home and read it, this is wonderful. And this is from a conference that they had at Si Lai Temple. So he's recognized as one of the forefront leaders, opening monasteries, universities, there we go, and schools all around the world. Engaging in religious dialogue, and here he is. I really like that picture. It's just one of my favorite pictures of him. That's why I snuck it in there. And there he is with the Dalai Lama. Not him, but he met with the Dalai Lama with all the difficulties that the Tibetans were having. He met with him and gave him, and through his support, he met with the Pope. He meets with, there's just so many if you go online and check it out. The art museums, the libraries, the publishing houses, the Buddha Light Publishing is what's publishing all of the books today. Also, little free mobile vans that are medical clinics that travel in third world countries, bringing aid to people. Unbelievable. Nurseries, senior citizens' homes. We have 2 here in the GTA. Innovative. Here he is, his innovation with television and radio programming to get the Dharma out. Just such an innovative individual. He's been bestowed with many honorary degrees. And this is only one picture. I like that picture as well. I picked and choose. There's so many. If you want to, you just Google images of Venerable Xing, and there's tons of them. Ugh, so many of them. And then we come to the BLIA, the Buddha Light International Association. Now, this was a conference that was held, a picture of a conference in 2012. Now, actually, he worked at establishing it in 1990, and it was inaugurated in Taiwan in 1991 and formally inaugurated in North America at Tsilai Temple in 1992. There are over 150 chapters internationally. We have our chapters here with the BLIA, and of the chapters, there's 8 chapters, sub-chapters that stretch across the GTA, actually from Kitchener to Markham. Yeah. And we even have an English-speaking sub-chapter, which our good friend Martin is the president, and Florence is our secretary right now. Okay. Just so that you know, yes, hello. So what is the BLIA? Anybody? Any of the ongoing students? Everybody looks down. Don't ask me.
Organization that works together with the monastics to support the missions of the temples.
Absolutely. Thank you.
See where you're the president. Get all the answers. I like that.
Good memory, not a good mind.
I'm so fortunate that he's here. Now, it's also been likened, Venerable Master Xing Ying writes, it's like the wings of a bird. A bird can't fly very well with one wing, so you need the 2 wings, the laity and the monastics working together to bring peace and joy. He also writes that it's a bodhisattva congregation promoting loving kindness. We're actually the 4 immeasurables: joy, loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity. And the goal of the organization is harmony. Okay. So how about the working principles of the BLIA? Again, it's underneath the screen for the new people. Anybody? What are the working principles? To give others confidence, joy, hope, and to render service to others. Now, if there's a disaster or you see a news clip of maybe a typhoon or a tsunami or something, and you see a bunch of people with the yellow vests, those are BLIA members. You see people around here wearing those yellow vests, that's what that's all about. It just shows the unity and the harmony working together internationally. Internationally, there's relief activities, fundraising locally and abroad, education, etc., etc. And you may have been here and seen when there's been money being raised for the tsunami, for example. All that money goes directly. Nothing is held back. In so many different charitable organizations, so much is kept back for administration, not here. When you give money, that whole 100% goes to, unless it's being funneled through the United Way or the Red Cross if there's something special there. Okay, so here is a wonderful picture of Venerable Master Xing Ying doing a one-stroke exhibition. I don't know if any of you have tried calligraphy. Not fun, not easy, you know, with the old style. But this is, he does all these characters with one stroke, not taking the brush off the paper. And he had an exhibition of this recently. We went and we had it in Toronto. A number of us went to see it. It's just phenomenal. This man is 87 years of age. He's almost legally blind, if not legally. How does he do this? He sets it up, and you know, just that he just says his hand is guided, and I believe so. The other thing that he's done, there's another one here. These are some of the works that he has. Beautifully done. One stroke. Now, in addition to this, he also hosted the World Conference on Sutric and Tantric Buddhism. He's bringing all these different Buddhist groups together. He presided, now this is huge, in 1998 he presided over a combination of Theravada, Mahayana, and Tibetan ordinations. Yes, which is really unheard of the time. And at that same time in 1998, when he had this mass ordination, he visited Thailand to receive the Buddha tooth relic. This is bringing us up to more modern times now. Kunje Dorje Rinpoche had this tooth relic. He's a Tibetan monk, And when he was forced to leave Tibet and flee, he was given this tooth relic of the Buddha to hold on to, with the promise that he should build a pagoda for the Buddha to house this tooth relic. Well, he was getting to be an old man. And there was a pivotal thing that happened, and I asked that in the questions that I've handed out. And so what happened was, because of something pivotal, I'm not going to tell you, I've probably already given it away, he gave the tooth relic to Venerable Master Xing Ying with the promise that Xing Ying would build a stupa for the tooth. And so he did. In 2011, he built the Buddhist Memorial Center. Look at this. Look at that. It's quite close to the Taiwan monastery and temple. Look at that. It's phenomenal. And for anyone that's interested, this whole book, I'll pass it around, is all about the building of the Buddha Memorial Center. It's fascinating. The eight pagodas leading up to the big Buddha statue represent the Noble Eightfold Path, and the 4 other pagodas just before the big Buddha statue are the 4 Noble Truths. The big Buddha. Phenomenal. Really unbelievable. And this just goes to show you, you know, build a stupa for the tooth, and he did. He did. And I'll tell you, it's unfortunate Scott isn't here. On Wednesday, Scott and Sheila returned from Taiwan. And I was kind of hoping they would be here, because I would ask them, because they just got back. And he was telling me Wednesday night that they were just blown away. They were truly blown away with the experience. Venerable Menyi asked one of her friends there to take them around. And they got into all these different places. They would go to the Buddha Memorial Center before it opened and wander around and get a private tour. They got a private tour of Fo Guangsheng Temple. It's just, when I was there, and I was there in 2004, my heart just was so opened to the compassion and the generosity of the people there. I cried every day, just because tears were running down my face, just because of the kindness of these people that would go to that extra step. And this is what Scott found too. And not only did they visit just Fo Guangsheng, the monastic took them all over the place to other temples. And he told me, he says, everywhere you go, it's like 40 Taiwanese dollars for incense. Everywhere you go, you're charged, except when you come here. At Fo Guangsheng, there's no charge. There's no charge to go through the Buddhist Memorial Center. The only charge is if you buy lunch. There's a small charge for lunch, like there is in our tea house. And it's unfortunate they're not here, but somebody that just had the experience. Now, Greg, when you took refuge, was that 2005 or 6? That was at the arena in Brampton. Yeah. Do you remember what year it was? Was it 2005? The reason why I bring that up is Venerable Master Xing Ying visited here. And they turned this whole arena in Brampton into like it was the inside of a temple. And was there 1,000 people there? More? More. And you were there, you watched. Yeah, you watched the ceremony. What did you think? That actually was the second time that I took refuge. And the first time, there's quite a backstory, which I won't get into right now, but I actually took refuge in 2004 here in Toronto, and Venerable Master Xing Ying presided over the ceremony. But he's such a presence. And I remember I renewed my precepts in 2005, and I remember him walking down on this red carpet, and tears came to my eyes. It's just the presence, but it's also this energy that I felt that seemed to just come from him. Unbelievable. And I don't know if he'll be back here to visit. I somehow doubt it. His health is failing. He's now, you'll see him in the book, building the Buddhist Memorial Center in a wheelchair. He was supported on either side in 2005. And he has a cane at that time, so it's not easy for him at all. Now there's also another book as well that is available, and it's How I Practice Humanistic Buddhism. And he wrote this as well. How can you incorporate and how does he, as the leader of Fo Guangsheng, show that incorporate humanistic Buddhism? There's 2 stories that out of this whole book that really resonated with me. They're all great, but one was shoes. It had to do with monastic shoes, the low-hand shoes, the ones that you see the monastics wear and the lay people wear once they've taken refuge. Thank you. Now, they're very unusual shoes because there's a lot of holes in them. And there's 6 holes in them at the side. And that represents the 6 paramitas. That's what that's all about. So you see how everything ties together. Thank you. So Venerable Master Xing Ying needed some shoes. So he went into this gentleman, and he went to his business, and he says, I need some shoes. Can you make me some shoes for the monastics? And he said, sure. So when it came, I think the bill was $30, 30 Taiwanese dollars, and he gave him 40. And the cobbler says, oh, no, you've given me too much money. He says, oh, no, you please keep that. Because his view was that the requirement for monastic shoes wouldn't be great, but he wanted him to stay in business. So he was forward thinking, and he explained that to him. The other wonderful story was at Nian Tian, the temple in Australia. When Venerable Master Xing Ying was visiting there, they stopped along the seashore to feed these seagulls, and they had some bread, and there were all these seagulls, and with seagulls, the more you have, the more come in. Like, hey, food, come on, guys. So they felt badly because they ran out of bread. So they went to the hotel that night, and on the way they went to a bread store and bought something like 10 loaves of bread. And the guy in the baker said, boy, those monastics really like bread. But he took it back. And the next morning, early in the morning, they went out to feed the seagulls. And, the seagulls were in heaven, 10 loaves of bread. But one thing they noticed was this one little tiny skinny seagull that had trouble getting any bread with the big guys muscling them out of the way. So they made sure, the monastics and Venerable Master Xing Ying made sure that this one seagull got some food. After he went back to Taiwan, one of the devotees wrote him, because this temple is inland. It's nowhere near the shore. And this little skinny seagull shows up and has made Nian Qian its permanent home. I know. I read that. I went, what? What a wonderful story. And there's so many stories like this on how I practice humanistic Buddhism. Finally, I'm going to end. And this newsletter, Venerable Master Xing Ying, as I said, he's a prolific author. He has for years all the books, all the articles, everything that he writes. He's every year he puts out a new newsletter. He says, for my Dharma protectors and friends. And at the very end, in here on the first page, about here, he wrote this poem. And he says, Dear Buddha, where are you? To express my feelings toward 80 years of searching for the Buddha's whereabouts. As it's been said, the world is but a creation of the mind. So is the Dharma realm. Even into its infinite future, the Buddha will always be in my heart. May every affectionate Buddhist be able to establish a heart-to-heart with the Buddha. And I close with that.
From the story of Venerable Master Xing Yin, we're only getting a glimpse of what Venerable Master Xing Yin has done for the propagation of humanistic Buddhism. It may all seem like great on the surface because all we see are all the success that he has. However, what we didn't see are the failures, the difficulties, and the hardship that he had been through, and how he applied the Dharma to help him on this journey. As Venerable Master Xing Yin said, where there is Dharma, there is a way. Though Venerable Master has been through a lot of hardship on this path, but he never took them as difficulties or hardship. Instead, he vowed to still become a monk to propagate Buddhism every single lifetime. In the next 2 class, we'll learn more about the Dharma and the teachings that Venerable Master Xing Yin applied throughout his life. And we can also say that as his philosophy, but it's more like these teachings are in his own word that modern people like us can understand. So we'll learn more about these teachings for the next 2 class. So last but not least, thank you very much for listening to this class. Please take care and stay safe. 弥陀佛。